Okay, so this week we're going to be working with 1 point perspective. Now, you might remember the word perspective from a project that we did that was called the Beginner's Perspective Study. And we had these things like the horizon line and some other things, but that was really simple. It didn't have a lot of the concepts I'm going to teach you today, but one that we are going to keep is the horizon line. So right here I have lined paper, and I know that some of you don't always have access to blank paper, which is fine. Lined paper for this project is actually preferable because you have all these lines to indicate kind of where to put your things or how to keep them straight. So right about that middle circle, kind of this line right here, I'm going to create a horizon line. Doesn't have to be completely straight, it's just kind of to indicate where the vanishing point is going to be. So that's the new word, but first I'm going to label horizon line. I want you guys to also label horizon line. Now in the middle, I'm going to create a larger dot. That's my vanishing point. That's where everything recedes or goes into. Vanishing point. You will also label vanishing point. Now, at the top, I'm also going to label or title 1 point perspective. Okay. Now, the guidelines for this project, I'm also going to put them on Schoology, but I'm going to write them down so that you know. You're going to have 2 forms above, 2 forms middle, and 2 forms below. I'll explain a little bit more, but that's kind of, I want you to draw, 6 forms. If you want extra credit though, you're gonna draw 2 more on your own. Doesn't matter where, as long as you have 8 total, okay? So the thing about perspective or 1 point perspective is that it only really works with geometric shapes. Like for example, if you have a sphere, yes, like you probably do learn about spheres in geometry, but it's hard to create perspective in this sense. So I'm going to start off with something that we do know a lot about, which is squares, okay? But before I do that, this is what I mean by middle. So I'm also going to label this middle. So right in the horizon line's middle. Above that is where I label above, and then below is below. This is just so you get a sense of what I'm trying to do. So above, I'm going to draw a square. Doesn't have to be perfect, but these lines on my lined paper do help. Now you will need a straight edge, such as a ruler or maybe even like an index card, something just to help you line up from each corner of each shape to the vanishing point. It can be a book. So like I was just saying, each corner goes into the vanishing point. If it's something like a corner that it's this far, you probably won't see that side. What we're doing right now is creating sides from each corner. So here's what I mean. I'm going to take my corner, I made a little dot so you can see, and go into the vanishing point. So 2 dots on the line. And then keep going. Now here's what I have, okay? Another idea that we're going to touch back on is parallel lines. So I'm going to write that down. Parallel. This means that the lines are next to each other but never touching. So if I make a parallel line of this line going down in this little area, fill that in, I have a side. Okay, make sure that if it's going straight up and down, it goes straight up and down. If you're going side to side, you'll also go side to side, which is why these lines are helpful. Okay, I do want you to fill in your sides, so I'm going to write that down so you don't forget. Fill in sides. So once you have this general kind of form, right, you have a square that's turned into a box because it goes into the vanishing point, I do want you to erase your guidelines. You probably won't be able to erase them all the way, which is fine because I do want to see that you created lines going into the vanishing point. Okay, so the first one that we're drawing together is a box. So I have one above, okay? The second one that I want to do is a triangle. So I have a triangle, I'm going to make it go all over here. And again, from each corner, you go into the vanishing point. Now you might not always see a huge difference in terms of the side. So like this side is going to be kind of small, but remember, it's about parallel lines. So trying to figure out what looks kind of like that line and making it look identical. And then same thing on this side. Now once you filled in those sides, go ahead and erase those lines. And now I have two shapes above. Now the reason why I'm having you guys do two above, two in the middle, and two below is because they're all going to look different based on where you put them in relationship to the vanishing point. So in the middle, if I do the same idea of a square or a box, it's going to look very different. It's kind of like if you were looking up at a box, looking straight at a box, and looking below, looking at the box. So you'll see. Okay. So drawing a square, and then my little two dots to indicate, and bring that into the vanishing point. Now, you won't see any of the sides from these two corners. So even if you drew the dots trying to bring them in, unless your box is see-through, you won't see anything. So only one side of this box is visible. And then I'm going to erase those lines. Now, if you want and you're confused and you do, I'm going to do another one, another box. You do a box. Doesn't matter where you put it. And you stick to that idea of each corner has a dot and it goes into the vanishing point. And you do that. You will see that these corners are going to go through the box. Okay, so I lightly drew that so you could see it goes through the box. You're not going to see that. So just erase it. And you can leave those there if you want to kind of remind you that not all sides are going to show up. Okay, so I have two in the middle. If you want, you can do a letter, some geometric letter. So I'm going to do an L because that's really easy. An L. And same idea, probably going to mark all of the corners and figure out what might go through. Now this side is really small. It does have a little bit of an angle to it, which is why I'm darkening it, but it's not a huge one to where I have to fill it in for this L, like this top part. So all I have to do now is create another parallel line parallel to this line, creating a side and filling that in. Now the reason why we're filling it in is because it's a lot easier to understand and see where the perspective is coming from. Okay, so I have 3 in the middle. Now I'm going to do 2 below, okay? So like I was saying, the circles, you can't really demonstrate dimension or space with a circle going into a vanishing point, because there's really no corners. So if you're trying to make this look like it's going back into space, the only way you could do that is by making a cylinder. So if you want, you could take the outermost edge from the vanishing point and lining it up with wherever it touches the circle. And that's my first side. Same idea with the other side of the circle, whatever the farthest point is. And we would create a parallel line of this. So it's a curve. And so it's not really a circle anymore, it's more of a cylinder, okay? So I'm gonna fill in that side. And it doesn't matter if you guys do it messy, I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to create perspective. Okay, so now I have a cylinder. I have one below. Now, if you want, you can even try experimenting with a different type of box. So I'm going to start with a regular box or square. And draw a square on the inside, which makes this more of a frame when we add sides and perspective. So I'm going to start with the outer square. Okay, and then I'm also going to, from the inner part, go through. Now, here's where you have to keep in mind that each side has to be the same width or depth. So if I decide that my box is going to be really thin, like this, that means that this side also has to be thin. Okay, I'm going to lightly do that. You can't make the top thick and then the side thin. It doesn't really work that way in terms of creating realistic perspective. So keeping it thin on all sides. That includes the inner part. So once I go into the inner part, it has to be kind of the same thickness as this part, because this is the same perspective as this. And the same idea, it has to be all around the same thickness. And then you can erase your guidelines. So now I have kind of like a square ring or frame. So my second one below. So now I have 7. I want to add one more just so you guys have a little more idea. You can do a diamond or even like a star, but keep in mind that the more sides you add, or the more corners, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So parallel lines one more time. And then erasing those guidelines. So this would get extra credit because I have 2 extra, okay? So here's the final product. I had 2 above, 2 in the middle, 2 below, and then 2 more. Okay, so this is pretty much what I'm expecting it to look like. If there are any questions, feel free to message me on Schoology. Don't forget to fill in the sides. You can use a pen to mark the horizon line and the vanishing point and kind of labeling stuff to make it easier to see, because sometimes the pencil isn't quite dark enough. Okay, so that's fine. You can even, if you want, outline one of the forms that you did to make it easier to see. With a pen or even a marker if you have a marker, okay?